The movie opens in the town of Ogden Marsh, where the locals are enjoying a high school baseball match. But the game suddenly stops when local resident Rory Hamill enters the pitch with a shotgun in his hands. He also has blood coming out of his nose. The town's sheriff, David, approaches the scene cautiously while his deputy, Russell, evacuates the pitch. David then tries to talk Rory into dropping the weapon, but the latter seems almost absent-minded. Instead, he raises his shotgun so David reacts on instinct and shoots first. In the evening, the sheriff meets with Rory's wife, Peggy, and his son, Kurt. He apologizes to them, explaining Rory looked drunk so he had no choice than to shoot. However, Peggy doesn't believe him and points out that Rory had been completely sober for years. The next day, David gets a call from the forensic lab and is surprised to learn that there was no alcohol in Rory's blood tests. Confused and upset, he revisits the pitch, searching for some kind of clue. There, he finds the local school's principal, Ben, sitting nearby and staring at nothing. He has the exact absent-minded look that Rory had. David has to call his name a couple of times to snap him into reality. Meanwhile, at the local hospital, David's wife, Dr. Judy, meets a local woman named Deidre. She has brought in her husband, Bill, as he spaces out from time to time. The doctor asks him several questions, but Bill simply repeats the same answer every time. That evening at home, Deidre hears a noise in the garage and rushes to check it out. She finds the tractor machine on, but her husband is nowhere around. She thus turns it off and starts looking around for Bill. At this moment, Deidre hears her son screaming, which prompts her to run back to the house. The room is empty, but the child soon arrives and tells her to be silent. They then move to hide in the wardrobe, where the kid mentions that his father is acting weird and even has a knife. Right then, they hear Bill walking upstairs, so they try to be as quiet as possible. But the man finds them anyway and locks the door of that room. Ignoring his family's desperate yelling, he then proceeds to pour gasoline all over the house and sets it on fire. By the time the cops, medics, and the firemen make it to the house, Deidre and the kid are dead. In the aftermath of this incident, the neighbors report that Bill was just mowing the lawn while his house burned. A furious Judy yells at him for being so nonchalant in the face of such a tragedy, but the latter simply whistles back. Later, Bill is taken to the police station to wait for his transfer, and he just stands there in his cell, staring at nothing. Elsewhere, right outside the town, 3 hunters are passing by a bog when they find a parachute stuck in some nearby trees. They quickly pull it out of the water and discover the body of an army pilot. Shortly after, the police arrive at the scene, and Russell remembers hearing a rumor of a military plane crashing in the bog. At the time, it sounded like a big lie because there were no TV or newspaper reports on the incident. David and Russell then decide to inspect the bog and soon discover that there's a plane underwater. While this is happening on the ground, a drone camera zooms in on the town of Ogden Marsh, with the words "Initiate Containment Protocol." Later, David researches where the town's water supply comes from. He confirms that it's from the bog, and the first house it reaches is Rory's. An army plane crashing into a river without coverage from the news is very suspicious. So, David thinks whatever the plane was carrying is contaminating the water and making people sick. He and Russell thus visit the mayor to ask him to shut down the water supply. But the latter refuses, as doing so would kill the crops and bankrupt their whole town. Worried about the safety of his loved ones, David decides to ignore direct orders and goes to shut the water supply himself. He even removes the valve so nobody can turn it back on. When the cops return to the station, they're disturbed to find Bill bleeding on the floor of his cell. It appears that he's dead, but then he suddenly awakens like a zombie and tries to attack them. Freaked out, David tries to contact his higher-ups but discovers the phone lines as well as the internet aren't working. He then goes outside, only to find that the town seems eerily deserted. At that moment, a mysterious black car takes pictures of David, but when he tries to approach, it quickly drives away. Spooked by these events, the sheriff goes home and tries to convince his wife to leave the town for a few days. But Judy refuses, as she is a doctor and the people need her in case there is an emergency. While they are chatting, Judy sees somebody outside their house and alerts her husband. David then goes out to check the barn, only to be arrested by a group of soldiers. They drag him onto a bus where he finds lots of kidnapped locals, including Judy and Russell. The bus then takes them to a military camp, set up at the local school, where people are being kept behind fences. The group is taken through some tents to be scanned for radioactivity and body temperature. everyone with abnormal results is separated from their families, even if they're children. Unfortunately, Judy's temperature is high, and the soldiers take her away. David tries to fight off the captors, but he's easily overpowered and knocked out. On the other hand, Judy is tied to a stretcher and taken inside a tent. She sees lots of soldiers in masks, the locals suffering, and blood stains everywhere. Shortly after, Judy is forcibly sedated, which renders her unconscious. When she wakes up, she finds herself in a room with dozens of people tied to stretchers and hears violent noises outside. It seems a car has crashed against the camp fences, and people are taking the chance to run away. As the soldiers try to stop them, a violent riot ensues, and the unwell people breach the containment area. This descends the place into chaos, and the soldiers and doctors are forced to escape in helicopters. Meanwhile, David wakes up inside a truck that has taken him to another camp. Everyone here is given a bracelet that marks them as not infected. Apparently, all the healthy people will be transferred away, but David refuses to leave without his wife. A neighbor tells him that the town has been closed off and the roadblocks on every highway have shot down entire families that tried to escape. Nonetheless, David manages to sneak away and makes it back to the police station. He finds his gun and is soon joined by his deputy, Russell. Both of them immediately hide when they hear the same black car from earlier driving outside. David later explains that Judy only has a fever because she's pregnant and convinces Russell to help rescue her. In the meantime, Judy spots her friend Becca on a nearby stretcher and they engage in conversation. But they are interrupted by the school principal Ben, who is covered in blood and carrying a farming fork. Clearly infected, he starts moving around the room, killing patients without mercy. He eventually approaches Becca, but before he can stab her, Judy screams to distract him. Ben then makes his way towards her and raises the fork to end her forever. But David and Russell arrive in the nick of time and shoot him dead. They then rescue the two surviving women and go outside, where they find dead bodies all over the place. Following this, the group begins crossing the town, which has been completely eviscerated. They look for a working car but quickly hide behind a truck when they hear a noise. It turns out to be the hunters from earlier who are shooting infected people before throwing the bodies in the back of their truck. Luckily, they soon drive away, and the group can keep going forward. The four eventually arrive near a house that belongs to Becca's boyfriend, Scotty. They then rush in and find him, hiding and completely healthy. Scotty reveals that his mother is also okay and she's gathering supplies. Unfortunately, things take a turn for the worse as a bunch of soldiers soon surround the house. The group hides in the barn and watches on as a soldier drags the old lady outside. Scotty can't bear to watch it, so he ignores his friends' warnings and rushes out to help his mother. Unfortunately, this turns out to be a grave mistake as he, along with his mom, are brutally shot and killed. The soldiers then use a flamethrower to mercilessly set their bodies on fire. The next morning, the group makes it to David's house where Russell works on repairing an old car. The others gather supplies while Judy decides to stop by the nursery to say goodbye. Unbeknownst to her, one of her infected colleagues, Peggy, is behind her. Moments later, David hears a noise and rushes to the nursery, only to find Judy tied to a chair. An infected Kurt then jumps out of nowhere to attack him. But David pushes him away and manages to stab Peggy with a nearby knife. The danger is still not averted though, as the barbaric Kurt tries to cause some damage. But Russell arrives in the nick of time and shoots him dead. Later, the group leaves in the car, and after driving for a while, Becca starts coughing. Russell thinks she may be infected, which causes an argument among everyone. At that moment, they notice a helicopter flying by, and David hides the vehicle inside a nearby car wash. While they wait for the chopper to leave, Becca sees someone outside. The platform then suddenly begins moving as the washing machine is turned on. Soon, a bunch of infected employees surround the vehicle and start breaking the windows. David fights against one of them while another reaches for Becca. She bravely smashes his head against the car and kicks him away. David also manages to push the other guy off, but another infected employee puts a hose around Becca's neck and yanks her out of the car. Sensing the threat, David and Russell disembark and begin killing the zombies around them. But it's too late as Becca has already succumbed to her injuries. To make matters worse, the helicopter flies by and blows up their car. None of the group members are injured, but now they're left with no modes of transportation. In the next scene, the remaining trio starts walking down the road and eventually finds Russell's truck. But it is also useless as the tires have been damaged by spikes. Right then, they see the mysterious black car approaching. Russell quickly grabs the spikes and throws them on the road, causing the car to flip and crash. Soon after, an agent crawls out of it, and David corners him, demanding an explanation. The agent finally reveals that the plane which they found in the bog had been transferring a prototype biological weapon designed to destabilize a population. It was actually on its way to Texas where it was to be destroyed, but the plane ended up crashing near Ogden Marsh. Upon hearing this, a furious David punches the guy and demands that he help them now. But Russell, who was acting increasingly aggressive, kills the man with a shot. He then wastes all the rifle's bullets by shooting in the air. After this, he stares at the sky and finally admits that he has been infected. Russell knows the end is near, but he just wants to walk with them a little longer so he doesn't feel lonely. Sometime later, the group discovers that the road to the main highway is blocked, but Russell says he can buy them some time. David thus gives him the gun, and, in a heroic act of sacrifice, Russell runs toward the soldiers to distract them. He tries using his gun, but is shot down almost immediately. Still, it is enough time for David and Judy to sneak around and cross the town border. They eventually make it to a gas station where they find 3 loaded trucks that were supposed to evacuate the healthy people. There are several dead bodies inside with bullet shells on the floor, indicating this was the government's plan all along. Fortunately, there's also a functional truck parked near the gas station. Following this, David heads to a nearby garage to gather supplies for their escape. There, he finds an abandoned army radio broadcasting a message saying something big will happen in 10 minutes. This worries David, so he rushes back to the gas station, and the couple gets into the truck. But before they can run away, a hunter grabs David's leg and drags him into a fight. A second hunter tries to enter the truck, but Judy immediately kills him with a gun. After exchanging a few hits, David manages to cover the hunter with oil and sets him on fire. He then steps away and watches his attacker die a horrible death. Soon afterwards, the couple gets inside the truck and finally leaves town. Since David brought the military radio with him, they listen to a countdown that soon reaches 0. Suddenly, they hear an explosion, and a very bright light illuminates the whole area. It turns out the military has blown up the entire town to finish off any remaining survivors. The bomb sends such a blast wave that it reaches the truck and sends it flying off the road. Moments later, David crawls out from the overturned truck and manages to rescue Judy. They then gingerly walk to the middle of the road and watch their beloved hometown being wiped out of existence. The couple now begins making their way to the nearest city in hopes of starting a new life. But unbeknownst to them, a drone camera is onto them and displays the words "Initiate Containment Protocol." In the final scene, newscasts all over the country report that the town was taken over by a normal fire that couldn't be stopped because of the wind. The explosion was attributed to a petrochemical plant that was blown up in the fire. There's a reporter on site, but an infected person suddenly interrupts the transmission.
So watch more movies like this video and subscribe the channel. Good day.